think. I need to make a note for myself to do that. Thank you. Well, thanks, Lee. So I guess one of the things I would still be concerned about, or at least want to know kind of what's coming with electric aviation, is the rules that, and I'm not sure I think they're still being worked out. Are there regulations about altitude, and if, will they still be the same, 500,000 feet, that kind of thing from humanoids? I don't know. One of my concerns here about a lot of the frequent flights that go over has to do with not just sound, but privacy, especially when there's a lot of low flying planes back and forth. So I would have that concern about electric aviation. We're not going to stop it. And I don't know how much influence we could have about, asking, or public input when that comes around, maybe for FAA regulations about.
Well, there is a sort of model right now. It's been around for a few years, and that's with ultralight aircraft. Because of the nature of them, they don't have very much power, and they're required not to have very much endurance. They can carry a 5-gallon gas tank, and that's the biggest. They're not allowed to fly over any area that's considered to be, what is their word? It's not condensed. It's
congested.
Congested. And because of that, and they're limited as to the speed they can fly and the weight. Many pilots weigh more than the airplane. But with an electric aircraft, first, the major problem is power storage. The engines themselves, the motors, are pretty powerful and don't weigh that much. A typical wing of an airplane has enough square footage to gather tremendous amount of sunlight to power it. But the problem is in the storage batteries themselves. They don't last long. They can't hold much of a charge. And so an electric aircraft is going to be able to be, at least for now, very limited in its range. It might be able to fly, maybe 20 minutes in the air before it has to come back down and be recharged, or, just a few miles. So the major problem is not going to be regulations about the nature of the airplane so much as the nature of its capacities. And we'll just have to see what the technology offers on that. But I agree that it's going to be quite a while before we see much in the way of concern over electric aircraft. NASA is working really hard on it, and they have some good models going. But until we get a storage battery that's way better than we have now, I don't think we're going to see too many electric airplanes in the air.
There are a couple VTOLs on out there now that claim to be able to fly 1.5 hours plus, and but they're strictly VTOL, like a kid's toy drone. Picks on up, goes, does whatever. Doesn't have the same sort of speed, so distance then becomes the factor. 20 minutes on an electric airplane with a standard type prop design is going to get you farther than 20 minutes on one of these things. So you got a speed distance issue there, not as much storage, because they've come up with a couple different solutions. And the big one that I'm seeing more and more on is the Tesla powered systems that they're starting to test in a variety of different theaters. We'll see what happens. But if they ever break that one on down to where they're able to pull electricity basically out of the air, whatever, then it all changes. The whole paradigm changes. You wind up with a VTOL where it's not a runway, where it's none of that stuff. I pull on in and land in my driveway and move it on into my garage.
You also have a carrying capacity issue with electric as well.
Right.
I mean, it all, like Lee says, though, it all boils down to battery size and capacity.
So in this program, they were talking about one called Joby Aviation, and they claim they can go 150 miles at this point. And hoping to be certified in 2023. So that caught my attention. So I don't know, I guess I would just keep your ears open maybe. And, you know, I just think it's, first of all, I think it's fascinating. Secondly, I do think it's kind of an interesting thing because it does address, you know, pollution and air pollution, which is one of the major concerns too about small aircraft and the fuel that they're burning.
Well, small aircraft do operate on 100 low lead for the most part, but it has lead in it. The idea that an electric airplane, or for that matter, an electric car, is clean is not entirely accurate, because you have to make the batteries and you have to make the aircraft and so forth, and then you have to dispose of those batteries.
Right.
Or if it uses solar cells, then you have that issue as well. So there are going to be additional problems unrelated to the actual emissions of the airplane
Right.
that contribute to pollution.
So
Where did
cleaner emissions, but different pollution problems.
Well,
Yeah, how
the
did-
emissions just come other places,
Yeah.
in the manufacture of the batteries and the solar cells and all of that.
Where did you get the electricity to charge the battery?
Exactly.
Right. Sure.
Are you
Well, yeah.
coal-fired?
Yeah.
That's
well,
what we
this is
need.
why I
We need a
say-
coal-fired, steam-operated airplane.
Exactly. I mean, this is one of the reasons I think it's an interesting area to look at. But if we were to just focus on the piece too of, you know, as the regulations are getting developed, you know, kind of keep that on our radar, no pun intended.
I'm gonna hazard a guess that in the short term, it's all about payload. And you could carry passengers or you can carry batteries, but you won't be able to carry both.
Mm.
And so I think it's much more likely this is going to emerge in the private plane
Mhm.
hobbyist realm than it is that San Juan Air is going to be flying electric planes anytime soon.
Yeah.
The liability issues alone of if you run out of battery halfway
Mhm.
across the Rosario Strait.
Yeah, well,
that's
sure.
just- that's
also the
my take
problem
on
with
it, basically.
liability with small private developers as well. That happened quite a lot with the initial ultralights, that they were falling out of the air with regularity.
Yeah.
And they you know, they don't weigh much, because so they don't have a lot of structural strength. And after a while, people were saying, hey, I don't want to make one of these things because I'll get sued and I'll be paying for it the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So it'll be a while. Ideally, what will happen is that we'll get a really good battery, a very efficient motor, a nicely developed prop design, and then solar cells on the wings. And if it really runs well, the solar cells will feed the battery, the engine will feed the propeller, and the propeller will feed back into, I don't know, some part of it, so it'll be self-generating and you can go forever.
That'd be nice. That'd be nice. Fly from here to forever.
Yeah, but you wouldn't be able to land.
Yeah.
Well, who needs to land? I guess,
Details,
you know?
details.
Seriously.
Now, we'll just hold out a lunch bag as you come by.
Comes equipped with parachutes or something.
Yeah, something like.
Okay, well, once again, it's fodder for some interesting conversation, I think. So curious, Alan and Greg, if there was any update on the data collection software?
Greg, you want to handle it?
No.
Okay, all right. There is, I'm diddling with something here. We're still having the company that we want to use is still having trouble with PayPal because they want to set it, you know, they want to be set as recurring payment. But yeah, he's working on it because I'm talking to him at least twice a week because it's really screwed him up. PayPal made a policy change and he's trying to get it all figured out. We have talked internally with Inlaika about using our credit card instead. I think we can probably resolve this by the 9th of August. Greg, what's your thought?
Oh, 9th of August board meeting, we will have a solution to this.
Yeah.
And if we need to, then we go to their competitor. If they can't seem to figure it on out, at least in an interim basis, and that'd be ADS-B,
Mhm.
which doesn't have the same sort of features. I'm still of a mind, I don't want to try and store this is the problem. These things are data hogs, and I mean hogs. If you want to store data for over Lummi Island, you're going to store data over the United States and half of, everything else just to get that one little slice. And to do that on a 24-hour basis, we're into petaflops, just to try.
Alan would be happy with that. We'll have a computer farm. It'll occupy almost the entire island, or we'll
Yeah.
hollow out the island and put it in that,
Yes, I like it.
How long?
Inside the mountain.
inside the mountain. Yep.
And that's really good. And we'll put solar panels on the mountain that look like trees.
Right. And we'll get DARPA involved.
Yes. Now, the problem is in data storage and being able to filter. Where we're at right now, if we had ADS-B, it requires one of us to be in there at least once a day to extract that information, to then somehow, and there isn't a manageable way I've found yet, to take that information and put it on into a template form, whatever, that we can then store the data to. You've got all of it, it's readable, but either we transcribe it ourselves, not fun. I gave up data entry 49 years ago. I wrote code, did a variety of other things, but just plain data entry, it's like, that's what we're talking. You read the information transferred over. So looking for, how do we capture our island? Nobody's got a methodology for us to geo-partition or geo-fence this island. We had that, great, then that's the only data we get. The difference is trying to, in ADS-B, you won't get an altitude, you get the full altitude, the full spectrum. So you get everything going into SeaTac that may overfly us within this range or not. If you're trying to get, those that are 2,500 feet or less, Skyglass is the only one currently that puts it on.
Has the filters.
Yeah, has the filters to be able to put a ceiling restriction on it. So the biggest problem we've got right now is data collection. How do you get all of this data? How do you store all of it? And then how do you filter it? So we could all be on a system, each one of us. It's not that expensive, it's like $5 a month. We could all be on a system, and each of us, take a particular section or a particular day, and hey, Thursday's your day. The end of Thursday, before you go to bed, go on the system, take a look, grab the data that we need, call it a night. I just got to figure out how we can grab the data and put it into something useful.
Kathy, can I jump in here?
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
of course.
I kind of learned my way around data sets and statistics back when there were 5.25-inch floppy drives. So all data sets were by definition little data. There was no such thing as big data. And now we have laptops that exceed the capacity of my first IBM AT by so many orders of magnitude. But I thought about this problem after the first meeting, kind of revisited it. And I started thinking about questions that could be answered without a lot of data. And because this is, in so many fields, this is what we do, right? We take a small, random, representative sample and look at it statistically and say, we think this represents the entire population of flights over Lummi Island, or, you know, whatever the question is. And so I just started messing around with the ADSB site and kind of looking at, you know, I spent about 10 days just sort of looking who's flying overhead, what do I see, who's up there, what are they doing? And the first thing that jumped out at me is that by far the most frequent flyer is San Juan Air, otherwise known as Second Wind. And I think, because I've actually taken a stab at it, that we can answer a lot of pretty fundamental questions about their flight patterns, their elevations that they fly at, with a very rudimentary. I hear a plane go overhead, I look at ADS, I log the data. I've been doing this for 3 weeks, 2-3 flights a day, 4 sometimes. So I have a little data set with 65 observations of San Juan Airlines flying overhead. And to me, it kind of answers the questions. I can see their flight patterns depending where they're going or where they're coming from. There's kind of a vaguely bell-shaped distribution of elevations that they fly at, centered right around 1,700 feet. So I feel like if the question was, what does San Juan Air do in July? But I've already answered that question with a really minimal investment of time. I'm on the computer anyway. Oh, there's a plane. I just snagged the information, put it in a spreadsheet. I wouldn't extrapolate that data to January or February, because I wouldn't be surprised if they fly lower. With, you know, there's lower ceilings in the winter, more weather, especially if they're trying to stay VFR. That could change things. But in this weather, we have high ceilings almost every day. I feel like I know what they're doing with a relatively modest data set, and adding hundreds and hundreds of data points to that, I don't think it's going to change the answer. I'd be very surprised, because I think my sample is representative of what they do.
2 key questions that I have that I need to ask. Are you able to ceiling isolate?
Oh, I don't need to. I just manually, I watch them fly on the ADSB app on the computer. I watch them fly over the island, plane by plane, and I say, and I have the tail numbers. There's 4 tail numbers for San Juan Air, and I say, oh, that's tail number 498Q, and he just flew over Kathy's house at 1,600 feet. He came from Friday Harbor, you know, and he's going. I mean, they're all going in and out of Bellingham Airport.
Right. What altitude was he flying?
Yeah, and that's what I log, 1,600. Okay. You know, because the ADS, it reports as barometric altimeter reading.
Right.
So I log that. I log the crossing points, which range from probably half a mile off of Migley Point down, you know, over the condos, over Curry, over Kathy's house, over a lot of flights over Otto, over Sunrise. And I've even clocked now 4 or 5 flights over drawing a blank, the point, Carter Point, at the end of the at the south end of the island. Not very typically, but they do fly there. They fly around the mountain that way, particularly when they're coming from Anacortes. So, you know, I guess my question is, at least in the short term, I'm really thinking about the commercial guys, because they sort of by definition are our most frequent customers, so to speak. And what more do we need to know than what I have sort of collected with a pretty robust data set? I mean, 65 observations it's a pretty good data set.
That's not bad.
If I may say, this is a good argument for us to split the question so that we identify each individual area that we're looking at. We're going to miss some because ADSB is not required of many older aircraft.
Right.
So all the people in the little hobby aircraft, you know, the Piper Cubs and things like that, unless they're just really good-spirited public servants, they're not going to have anything. They don't even have a starter on those things.
Right,
no electrical system.
right.
And quite often a little handheld radio and that's it. But, okay, so we identify a commercial carrier and we say, all right, we know where they fly and how they fly, and we don't see much in the way of transgressions from them ever, but we've got data enough to say that we've got that answered. Then we can look at others like Peace Health, for example. And okay, those guys are back and forth a lot. They seem to be generating a good deal of noise and traffic. And
I'm sorry, which outfit is that?
Peace, is it Peace Health?
Oh,
Yes.
Peace Health,
Yeah.
Helicopters.
the helicopters,
So
yeah.
we want to really focus on Peace Health, and part of that could be just communicating with the folks
Mhm.
rather than wait and you know, drop a bombshell on them. We might just be able to you know, write a nice letter and say, here, is there any way you could kind of go a little bit further north of the island and not do that? And it could easily be that, you know, it's just a slight movement of the stick on their part, and they would be happy to do that. And that could eliminate a large part of our problem, with the exception of really emergency runs where they've just got to cut the mustard. And then you're just going to hear that every now and then.
Yeah.
I should add that
the Coast Guard,
like
when they have one of their ships up, they make some noise.
I've not made any attempt to get a handle on the helicopters. Yeah,
Yeah.
I just sort of focused on fixed wing
Yep.
aircraft. Like I said, the San Juan Air / Second Wind kind of jumped out of the page as being the ones that, I mean, they fly 3 regular flights a day, but of course this time of year there's many other flights and to other locations. I've seen one fly to Stewart. I've seen flights to Anacortes. These aren't on their regular schedule. And then second place seems to be Island Air, also known as Cannery Leasing, and they're out of Friday Harbor. And I've just kind of kept an eye on them, but I haven't tried to collect any data about them. And this is completely unscientific, but my impression is that they don't fly any lower than everybody else. Their planes are just louder. But that's, you know.
Well, a lot of those are
me.
turboprops, and they're going to make a bunch of noise, and they're carrying a fairly heavy load.
Yeah.
So Dave, thank you so much for taking the time to do all that and to make those observations. And I think this kind of, and Lee, as you were saying, I guess I'm seeing kind of 2 prongs here. Like, it would be great if we could figure out a way to monitor, you know, and capture kind of the data in terms of what is happening over the island for some maybe longer term, bigger questions and conversation. But I'm wondering if we could write a letter to San Juan Airlines and to Cannery Leasing and Island Air. So for instance, I don't know if you can see this, but I took this the other morning at 8:30. There was 3 Island airplanes that went over, one right after the other, at about 1,000 feet. And so Island Air tends to, it kind of depends on who's flying. Like right now, I've been kind of watching them, you know, all for a while and intermittently logging them in, but I take a lot of screenshots. I've got a gazillion screenshots. But Island Air actually tends to fly a little lower, although I think it just depends on the pilot, you know, who's flying the plane. And if like there's some days where they're just like back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And then there's other days where I hear them, but they're, you know, they're up at 2,500 feet, or if it's super early in the morning, they'll be up really high, which is great. I was like, thank you. It makes such a difference. Anyway, I'm kind of hoping that we could write some preliminary letters to Island Air / Cannery Leasing, San Juan Airlines, which also is Jason Douglas and Second Wind Aviation. And then maybe Peace Health, once we find out if it is Peace Health who's flying those helicopters, I haven't looked into that. And just kind of establish communication with them and let them know, hey, we're paying attention. I mean, we wouldn't say that in those words, but we're here, we're noticing that you're flying over, frequently in certain parts of the island. It would really, like Lee, you were saying, if we could find say in a really positive way, it makes a big difference to people on the ground if you could find a way to fly higher or vary your routes a little bit. So I don't know.
I'm not sure I'm ready to kind of
Right.
go out on that limb yet. I'm not sure I have all the facts.
Yeah.
And one of the things I noticed, again, just with San Juan, because that's the only one I've been tracking, but I mean, from a noise standpoint, when they fly over Sunrise, the difference between 1,400 feet and 1,700 feet or 1,900 feet, it depends more on the aircraft than it does
Yes.
on the elevation. I can't tell the difference until when I hear them. And then I look at ADSB and it tells me how high they are. And so I don't know. I mean, the average for my data set is 1,700 feet.
Mhm.
And the lowest they've ever flown over is 11. And there's only a couple of flights that are 12 or below.
Yeah.
Most of them are 15 or above.
Yeah.
So if they're flying 1,500 feet or higher, I'm not sure what I would ask them to do differently than what they're doing now.
Well, it's still okay to tell an operator that they're flying over people. And would they be able to make an adjustment slightly?
But I think,
or
don't you
whatever?
think they know that, Lee?
They might, but small operations particularly, especially with the cost of fuel these days, if they can not pay $55 that they don't have to for a little extra fuel, they'll do that. And I agree also with the idea that there are individual pilots who are going to be doing differently. Years ago, Reeves Aleutian Airways used to be a bunch of cowboys, and they prided themselves on just about going anywhere they damn felt like it, and land on a sandbar in the middle of nothing. So sometimes the manager is not aware that the individual pilots are making choices about flying at 1,100 feet as opposed to 2,500 feet. And so if they have already some guidelines for the pilots and the pilots are cutting corners a little bit, they can snap them too. And a letter in the appropriate time could help that. But I agree that before we start writing letters to too many people, we probably need to have more information and clearer, and have our own questions answered about what kind of data do we want, and where does that, what kinds of aircraft are we talking about here?
Right.
And so I think small private is one. Helicopter traffic is another, and that just
Turboprop.
encompasses 2 or 3 different sources at least. And then commercial, which is a totally different deal. And those are normally the small commercial. We're not going to have any 747s clipping the treetops here.
I hope not.
The thing I think one of the comments is that was very good. The turboprops are noisy, and if the data we can capture can include the type of aircraft, that helps, because they can that we can get to a point maybe in a letter that says, hey, could you have your turboprops fly higher?
Well, and a minor contribution to that is I think a day or two ago, a guy came flying past us on a powered parachute, and those things are loud.
Yeah.
What was it?
It's a powered parachute. You wear the engine and propeller on your back,
Like a
and there's a
backpack.
parachute up above, and it
It's
just
a
pushes you through
paraglider.
the air, and
I
it's a
see.
2-cycle motor. And how they can stand the noise, I don't know.
Well,
Sounds like
And
a
well,
they're ugly
chainsaw.
and they're slow, so they make a lot of noise for a long time.
but they're not gonna be squawking any kind of data.
No, they won't,
No.
and
Yeah.
it's really rare.
Yeah.
Well, they don't, I
Yeah,
mean, they don't even have
If
tail
we
numbers. I mean,
discover a
that's a
nest
totally
of them, we
different
can just, you know,
world.
spray them, I think.
a little bug spray. But the couple of helicopters that I have tracked that were running off the north point of the island were running between 1,000 and 1,700 feet.
Yeah.
But I don't think that they were, considering the speed they were going, I don't think that they were on emergency runs. So yeah,
Right.
and that's
But-
something that also is a good data point, is, you know, they're what speed they're running, because I can tell you if they're running an emergency run or not, because they're not going to just, you know, they're not going to diddle around. They're going to, like Lee was talking about, they're going to really push it to get where they're going. But I think it is early to do a letter. I mean, one of the things that I heard from one of the prior meetings is us not being defined as a it was
Congested area, populated.
congested area. Congested is not the
community.
as a community.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was something like that. And I think that's an important thing to look at, because that gives you, from what I'm understanding, from what I'm hearing, as you know, somebody that does not fly anymore, the you know, the FAA has rules and regs for over those areas.
Yes.
So I think that's something that we need to look at. Get that nailed down. Are we or are we not? And collect data. And then we have something tangible to write about, rather than writing them now and then writing them again and then writing them again. On you become you become a mosquito in somebody's ear. They're
Well,
just
if
going
we
to bat
write,
you out of the way.
if we write a letter and it's marginally effective, we've kind of used up our juice.
No,
The
I
next
agree.
letter coming out is not going to have much impact.
No, I agree.
Could
I wouldn't rush the process.
Kathy, could I do a little screen share? Just take a
Sure.
couple of minutes.
Sure, of course.
Some other things that I found with just
Yeah,
about
you bet.
San Juan Airlines, because I think it might help us frame future questions that we have about
Okay.
other operations or types of aircraft. So let me just do a screen share here.
I have to do something to let
You
you.
have to enable screen sharing. It's either going to be a button along the bottom or a button along the top.
Well, there's one. I want to do mine. So screen share, so one participant can share at a time is where I had it. Is that,
Yeah.
so you should be able to.
Let me try again. There we go.
Yeah, I always set up the meetings with that turned on as the default.
Okay. So this is a summary of my little 65 flights of data, and that's, you can sort of see in the histogram there the almost bell-shaped
Mhm.
curve, average, median, standard deviation. The 95% occurrence band, that's the mean plus or minus 2 standard deviations. That means statistically 95% of the flights should always fall between those parameters, 1190 to 2180, if we believe this is a representative sample. So there's that. But what I wanted to show was a couple of, and I hope you can see this clearly.
Yep.
This is the path of a typical San Juan Air flight out of Bellingham over to Friday Harbor, back through Orcas, East Sound, and then back to Bellingham. And what I want to point out is a couple of things. The first is when they come out of Bellingham, I'm not sure they're lining up on your house, Kathy, as much as they are flying over water. They're splitting the peninsula and
Mhm.
Portage Island. And thinking about the Orcas airport guidelines to pilots, I mean, that's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to fly over water and minimize the amount of time they're spent flying over land. And really this flight kind of did that. It kind of skirts the southeast edge of Orcas, goes into Friday, comes back out. It does fly across the western half of Orcas, but then after they leave East Sound, they fly back, and they're, you know, I don't know what that is, maybe a half a mile off of Migley Point and back into the airport. And that's really, that captures an awful lot of their flights. They're staying over the, I mean, it is this more or less the straightest line between Bellingham and Friday Harbor also, but they're spending a lot of time over water. And the Orcas, flights to and from Orcas are almost all up in here and minimally impact anything. I mean, they don't fly south of Point Migley for the most part. So that's one. And then I want to show a couple of other ones. This is one of just a couple of flights I've logged where they flew to Roach Harbor. And this, I thought this one is interesting because that's not a straight line flight. They specifically skirted us, and they particularly skirted Orcas. Again, consistent with the Orcas airport guidelines to fly over water, not over land.
I would think that actually what they're doing is they're aiming themselves to skirt Orcas
Mhm.
because of the Orcas regulations or
Well,
the
that could be.
ask.
That could be.
And
But,
that's just a coincidence that
yeah,
it causes it to miss
well,
us a lot.
let me finish the presentation and then we'll talk about coincidences. Okay, here's a flight, the only flight I've seen from Port Angeles. And they're sort of weaving in and out of the islands there to minimize flying over San Juan, minimizing flights over Lopez, and minimizing flying over Orcas. And of course, they do traverse the waist of Lummi Island because that's the, you know, more or less a straight shot into the airport. One more. Oh, this one. Again, this is probably more to do with the Orcas regulations, but they flew all the way down East Sound. For some reason, made a loop over Blakely and then flew into Bellingham that way. So I have others, but those are flight patterns that I've seen that you know, depart from that straight to Friday Harbor and back, and the typical Orcas route out and back, and those all suggest to me that the pilots are cognizant of, you know, sort of these guiding principles of manifested by the Orcas guidelines. So I kind of I'm having trouble. Oh, and then like I said, there's several, I didn't show one, but there's several where they go all the way south of the island and cross over Carter Point. Not very many, but there's a handful.
Mhm.
So.
Well, a couple observations I would make. Thanks for doing all that. And I think that a lot of that is consistent with what I've seen recently. Most of those flights that go over the center of the island tend to go more or less over my house. If I don't see them from where I am, I don't log them. Like I don't, you know,
Right.
But if they're like right over my house,
Right. But
then
that's a self-selecting sample.
well, sure. But so I'm just
And
saying that those are the ones that I've been kind of paying attention
Right.
to and trying to.
Right. But I intentionally tried not to do that.
Yeah, no,
Not log the ones that fly over my house
Right.
to get
Right.
a bigger picture of what
Sure.
they're doing.
Sure.
And even the ones that fly over the waist of the islands, I mean, they range from Sunrise Cove. There's a lot over the Otto. There's some over your house, and there's a few that are further north, even up as far as Curry. So it's not just one crossing point. I mean, depending on how
Right.
finally you want to slice and dice it. They
Yeah.
cross the island a number of places.
So what I've noticed is that some of this has shifted a little bit in the last month or two from what I've seen generally over the last couple of years. And I know this is going to sound really silly, but I think, well, there's one thing that's going to sound silly and one that's not. One is that I think the price of gasoline has lessened the number of planes. I have noticed it does seem like there's fewer planes going back and forth than there were just even a couple of months ago. So I wonder if it's, you know, I mean, the obvious thing to me is price of gas. I don't know. I don't know why. The sillier part is that it turns out my granddaughter and I were talking, and one of her housemates is actually a pilot for San Juan Island Airlines. And we were out here visiting about 6 weeks ago, two months ago, and planes kept going over, and she commented on how many planes there were. And I said, yes, this is a problem. And she said, oh, one of my roommates works for San Juan Airlines. And I said, well, why don't you go tell him to fly higher or go around the island? And they have been for, you know, I mean, I have seen this slower change. So I do think that if there's, you know, I mean, I know this is going to sound really silly, but I mean, I've even thought like, you know, I'd be happy to take like a couple dozen cookies to the most cooperative, you know, whether it's San Juan Airlines or have a little
Right.
contest, like, you know.
But it's, at some point, you might have to buy them a full barrel of avgas, which is over $8 a gallon right now. I mean, there's good reasons not to fly zigzag routes or higher than necessary.
Well, I tell
and it's
you,
economical.
For me, it makes a huge difference when you say they go over Otto. I mean, Otto's right next to my property, but if you say they go over Otto as opposed to right over my house at 7 a.m, that makes a big difference. And it's only, you know, we're only talking a little bit, and that's more recent.
But
So that's all I'm saying. You know, these patterns seem to change. I think it depends on
yeah,
the
but I mean, the last thing we want to get into is sort of a don't fly over my house. I mean, there's hundreds of people on this island, and
sure.
There, where does this lead? I mean, I don't.
We have to be careful that we have to concern ourselves with the entire island.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I was going to comment on your frequency comment. I think that may be more to the loosening attitude about COVID. More people are traveling.
I would increase flights, not decrease them.
It would increase the flights, yes.
But flights are decreasing.
Did you say the flights are decreasing?
Well, it seems like there's fewer going right overhead here.
Okay.
Marginally, but
yeah, but so that might be a pattern type thing where they're flying. I think David's approach is really good, because you have to see what's really happening.
No, I agree.
To be able to get the big picture, and if they are, you know, moving the routes a little bit for whatever reason, that's going to affect your particular observation, just like David's observations are going to be different if they move the path and stuff.
Well,
so I think we need data.
There are a few other variables that will never be able to be fixed, because it's not merely a matter of the route. One is the prevailing winds. A pilot takes off into the wind, they land into the wind because it's just far, far safer and easier on the equipment. But what that means is that 90% of the time you're going to take off out of Bellingham headed south, because the wind comes from the south. Right. And when you take off that way, you're going to exit according to a format, 245 if you're going to go over to San Juan Island. And when you're headed to San Juan, you need to keep in mind what the approach is to San Juan, which is going to be predetermined. There is a preferred runway and a preferred direction you're normally going to go in. And so that will take you in a different line. Let's say if the wind shifts and comes from another direction. The other is there can be some traffic situations, airport closures or runway closures and so forth. So every now and then you'll see a pilot go in a completely different direction, and there might be that will happen for maybe 2 or 3 days, and then it'll shift back because the weather patterns shift or whatever, as we have a storm front coming through. The major issue is going to be whether people are making choices to fly at lower altitudes than they should, and whether adequate consideration is being made of Lemmy Island and the noise factor. And if they can go up a few hundred feet, I mean, this histogram you showed, some of those folks were pretty outside the limits. And I can understand flying higher because you sometimes want to avoid other aircraft, and you don't, and so you fly at a different altitude. You're required to be 500 below or 500 above the other lanes, depending on which direction you're going. But people who are flying down around 1,100 or 1,000 feet, there's no call for that. They need to be up where they're high enough they don't create a problem, and they can hop up and back down again without burning a lot of extra fuel. But a manager will be very concerned about fuel burn. And as you say, $8 a gallon, when these things gobble up, maybe 50, 60 gallons just to get from here to San Juan Island, and maybe more than that, you're talking about several $100s.
And I don't think, based on their pricing, I don't think San Juan's margins are very wide.
Yeah, exactly.
So the price, you know, a dollar bump in av fuel gas, I suspect they feel that.
Which could account for the fewer number of flights. They might have cut back a run or two,
Yeah.
because it's just too expensive.
Well, there's a couple of things there. One, so their aircraft, they have two 172s and two 207, 208. So they have 2 4-seat planes and 2 6-seat planes. And I can't see any rhyme or reason to, I think they fly, you know, depending how many seats they need.
Oh, yeah.
But whether they're, you know, trying to fill the planes up so they're not flying just one person or 2 people over at a time. At this point, I have no idea
Well, if you have a choice, you're going to fly a 172 with a 4-cylinder or a 6-cylinder motor over a gas gobbler turboprop for absolutely sure. Because those things, they eat up gas just sitting on the airport. Because they're basically a jet airplane with a propeller attached to it.
So, hey, you doing?
So I'd like to propose that we come up with some few clear questions and information needs, so we can begin to attack this systematically, and maybe even prioritize some over others. I don't know. So we can begin to report back about what's what. I'd be curious to find out a lot more than I know about the helicopter situation, because right now, all I know is that they live in a different world than a fixed wing airplane. And you just, if you're out at an airport and flying, you just ignore them like a bunch of gnats, because they go other places and do other things, and they don't have anything to do with you. They don't even talk to you.
And we only hear them here when it's an obvious call, because there's a pad right next to us here.
It's very evident that most of them coming on out of Friday Harbor or the other islands They like to hug the base of the mountain right on down Sunrise. They like to be off of Sunrise toward the mountain through that pasture land that goes all the way on through there. And then they hit right on over that last set of houses right there on Seacrest and blast across.
Well, and a pilot is going to be wise to do that.
Yeah.
If a fixed wing aircraft gets in trouble, they might be able to glide from here to a nice safe place to land. If a
Yeah.
helicopter goes down, they better have a good friendly field below them.
And that's
not a
what they're
forest or
doing.
a stump farm.
That's exactly what they're doing. They're hitting those pastures that come all the way on down there from the far end of North Nugent, all the way on down that trails down Sunrise, comes right across the base of that mountain, comes across that last little section, then is over water.
Yep.
That's his shortcut. So he's going to want to fly that route as much as possible. Now, the
Mhm.
question is, again, as you aptly pointed out, Lee, it's altitude. He hadn't got a glide slope. He hadn't got anything that he's going to be able to, other than rotation, and that's not always a very good option. So then the question is, okay, can we mitigate that at all? And the other route is that he hits the people over on South Nugent. I'm sorry, he hits South Nugent there, comes across the base of the preserve on the other side of Sunset, goes over that land, and then hits the neighbor two houses down on Seacrest. That's about it. There isn't anything there, but there's no pasture land through that. It's all trees.
Mhm.
So he's going to follow that pasture land every time.
Yeah, and I think with the helicopters, we really have to look at, is it a non-emergency run or not? If it's an emergency run, as far as I'm concerned, you fly
Sure.
over anything you can to get to do the job.
Yep.
But if it's non-emergency, that's another subject. David, do you?
Just cut out, Alan.
Alan, you muted yourself.
Yeah, I can tell. I can tell.
Okay.
I know.
Well, and I can always yell at him. He's way
Yeah.
down there.
Yeah, exactly. We're at different ends of the house, so we don't cause feedback. The pulse point is whenever I hear the sirens go off, I pull up this app called Pulse Point, and it tells me where on the island the call is and what's been dispatched, including the helicopters. So it might be something to look at that to keep an eye on. I don't have history, however, because I'm not at that level to be able to get that kind of stuff. But it's something that can be used to see if it is an emergency call or not. But I just wanted to say, if it's a helicopter and it's emergency, I don't care. You can, if you want to cause the chimney vent here to spin, I don't care.
I'm going to point out one glaringly obvious thing. One, David, you're doing an excellent job in the data you're collecting the way you're doing it. That's just plain stellar. Two, put that together in some sort of format so that any one of the members on this particular team or Joe Bag of Donuts can follow that, log into ADS, follow this, gather some data, and we have the data that's on in there. Because that's the key. Alan today was having training. Unfortunately, I was tied up in several other different things on how to put information into the schedule on the website. One of these days, when things slow down, we'll do a YouTube video or something. Here's how you do it. But if we have clean, clear instruction on how you're gathering, what you're doing, and where you do that, you're on top of the heap. You floated up to the very top here of data collection, storage, and statistical analysis. So you're right, the sets aren't big. The data is small unless you wind up taking ADS and gathering the whole thing.
Right.
So you've obviously got a methodology that's working. I like it.
Right.
I like it.
And I think, Greg, I won't say how far this will go. I mean, to me, it works for San Juan Air. It probably is going to work for Island Air. It may work. I don't understand the Bellingham Aviation Services because it's an FBO operation, but I see their planes up a lot. So I don't know what they're doing in the air.
Pilot training, part of it.
Perhaps. Yeah.
And
I mean,
sometimes
Lee,
they,
you would know much more, or Greg, I don't, what do FBO operations do? I thought they mostly service planes and
well, it's
sold
just a
fuel.
gas
but-
station at an airport.
Yeah.
But they usually have a few airplanes and they do a lot of pilot training out of there. They
Okay.
also have, you know, what is it when you want to hire an airplane?
Charter.
Charter.
Yeah, you get a charter to go somewhere, whatever. So there's a whole lot of that little meat and potato stuff that they do.
Anyway, then there's a few others. I mean, FedEx planes go over once in a while. Us, this was, I think, was a one-off deal, but there were some aerial photograph planes up when I first started doing this, and they go back and forth and back and forth. But they fly about 4,000 feet
Mhm.
when they're shooting pictures. So
Yeah.
you know, it was a non-issue. It's just cool to look at
It is
the tracks.
their pattern.
But anyway, I think if we kind of work through the regular customers using my approach, see how far that goes. And then, you know, I mean, I don't really know what to say. I mean, if there's individual private planes or even frequent, you know, I can't tell yet. Are the same 24 pilots, local pilots flying over us every weekend, or is it, you know, more random than that? But ADS-B tells you, most of the time, tells you the name of the pilot and the tail number, and, you know, so, but anyway, that's.
Yeah. Let me ask, how are you capturing it? Is it into an Excel or what?
Mhm.
Okay, because other than I think Greg, who's having trouble connecting because of Google idiocy, we could set up, you know, a
Google Doc spreadsheet.
It's an Excel type spreadsheet under Leica that we can share that link for those of us that can access that, okay, and be able to share that data between us, rather than it just being in one spot with you, David. And that might be able to help too, because we can load in the observations from several spots.
Or, I mean, or I could just send everybody mine as a template and then let it, you know, people go to town and log in, you know, whatever they want to observe, or we could try to divvy it up.
Yeah.
I
And
think
then have a way to consolidate it, which is easy.
I think Lee hit upon the strategy simple enough. You have your methodology and you're doing these commercial ones. Select the ones you're after. One person goes after the helicopters. One person goes after the privates. We do it that way. We keep it all clean and simple. You know, gee, one person can cross-check another, see what they're seeing. But if you divide it on up, and I think Lee hit right on it, it's the 3 categories. Your standard commercial, your fixed wing pilot, and rotary, what's coming through, whoever it is.
I would just like to see more people on this committee doing that. I don't have the time to do it.
No, I know. I'd like to see more people on the committee. And to that end, there are 2 of us, well, 3 of us here that know for sure Saturday, Leica is having a booth at Saturday Market, and Public Doc Committee will be there. And this committee, Aviation Committee, is more than invited and welcome to any of our booths that we have to talk to the general public. So that's where you may be able to recruit 1 or 2 more people. If you got the time, we're going to be there from 10 to 1, guaranteed.
Yeah. Catherine can't make it because she's doing Heritage Trust.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I told her.
I'll be on site. I just can't be in 2 booths at once.
No, but we can refer people to them.
Right.
But and we can try to cover it. But David, if you're going to be, if you're around on Saturday, it'd be great
Well,
if you.
I am, but I want to go booth to booth. I don't want to get.
He wants to get some caramels, I bet.
No, well,
Yeah.
I mean, I want to visit some other booths. Actually, I want to talk to the public doc people. So,
Well, that's at the same booth as we are.
okay, well,
It,
but I don't want to sit on the wrong side of the table. That's the.
Jump back and
I'm
forth.
gonna have to go.
there is no wrong side of the table.
Yeah, I know. I'm gonna have to go soon because Pam and I haven't had dinner yet.
Oh,
And
gosh.
she's putting a pizza together. I just want to make one comment in case I'm not here for it, looking down the agenda. And that is the possibilities of surveying the community. And this is kind of a pet peeve of mine, badly done surveys. And there's a few people on the planet who are on the island, I'll say, who know how to properly construct a survey so that it doesn't immediately skew the answers.
Yes, thank you.
But I do not want to replicate this. I do not want this committee to replicate what Public Doc, which was basically put out a questionnaire that said, tell us about your horrible experience with a ferry outage. That's not a survey. That's a leading question.
Yeah.
I absolutely.
With a predictable outcome.
Do you still beat your wife? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, that was actually a questionnaire of, did you have trouble? And tell us about that.
Still,
but yes,
but nobody who didn't have any trouble is going to respond to that.
Right.
So it's a self-selecting subset of the population.
Yeah,
so you need
that was in their case intentional.
Yeah.
Because they're
but
looking
it's not good.
Yeah, I understand, but that's the criteria for why there's a reason for the request of the public doc, the people that have problems.
Right. But I think
that's the whole thing. But
setting that aside, I would
sure.
hope that any questionnaire coming out of this committee would be sort of like on a scale of 1 to 5, rate how affected you are by noise of overhead.
Yeah. It's more
pixelated.
appropriate for this committee.
Yeah. And that's going to take a little care to put that together.
Absolutely.
No bias.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree.
Yeah,
I would
because
not want to put out one without having a lot of thought put into it and being very careful about it. I'm not in any rush to do that.
It's a different animal than what the public doc committee was looking for. And we do have this, the system has the capability to do polls and in any way you want to do them.
I'm not worried about the delivery. I'm worried about
the question
content. So that's all.
I agree. I totally agree, because you may have you might get such a response on it that's like, this is a moot point.
Right.
Yep.
Well, just to go back for a second, Lee, you talked about proposing, and looking for clear questions and information needs. Did you have some other than helicopters? Did you have anything else to add or expand on?
I think that the first thing is that we divide up the nature of the aircraft so that we're targeting specifically what we're looking for there. I think also we have some generic needs about what exactly a flight chart looks like right now over Lummi Island. And I've got a copy here that doesn't show us with anything other than airspace. Although we do have an airway that runs almost directly over my house. But that's commercial. Well, it's not entirely commercial. But the preserve doesn't show as a protected area, nor does any part of the mountains show as a wildlife area. There's no box that says don't go there. And so just to become a little smarter about what pilots currently have that they're supposed to do would be helpful.
Alan, a separate note. Refer back to what Terry was saying the other night. And in that Lummi Island by the numbers, that's the perfect place for that kind of foil.
Yeah.
Okay. Noted.
Lee, you want to hold up one of those charts that you did?
Yep.
You can get it fairly close to the camera.
This is a copy of the sectional chart showing Lummi Island. I think I have it upside down. Is that better?
Yeah.
Oh, it's
Anyway,
upside down now, but that's okay.
they're all complicated and so forth, but
Yeah.
we can see the island. We can see its relationship to San Juan and Freddie Harbor and all that, and some of the airways that it shows and so forth, and also the division of altitudes around the airport. That big circle that's around the Bellingham Airport shows you how high they can fly and how low they must, and so forth for
Yeah.
approaches.
How
So
many
it
of those
helps
did
us a
you?
little bit in understanding this. But
many of
the
those
more
did you
we, the
print?
more we know about what pilots are required to do and where we are in relationship to these other airports and activities, the better off we are too.
How many of those did you get printed?
I made 10. I can send them out, or Alan and I can work out how to get a copy to you.
Mhm.
Well, you
That's
could have,
something-
I'd get one down Saturday.
Yeah, you just
Yeah.
pass them out on Saturday.
Yeah, we'll bring them with us
And
to the
we'll order
to the-
ball caps with wings on them. So that
and
we're
a
all,
little propeller.
yeah, there you go.
Ah, boy. Anyway,
All
yeah, that's
right.
a good idea. That might have piqued some interest also.
Yes,
Well, also,
Now,
that's
you-
really helpful information. And also I would appreciate like looking at it and having you kind of explain what we're looking at.
Yeah, I'll make copies of the legends so that you have that to refer to as well, because these things are crammed with information. It's almost daunting to take a look at it and say, I've got to understand all that before I can spin a propeller.
So before Dave goes, I know you must be starving. If you could send your what you've done as a template, that would be helpful. And then we can take a look at that. And then maybe all of you can be thinking about, sounds like Lee, you'd be interested in helicopters.
I think so.
Maybe I'm happy to take on like Island Air, but that's just, part of the other half of the commercial, or third or whatever. I
Well,
I
Kathy,
don't know if that makes sense, but we can think about that division.
I was going to volunteer to do Island Air
Oh,
/ cannery leasing next, just because I've kind of,
okay.
I mean, unless you think we need more data at
Oh.
this point about San Juan Air, I personally don't. I mean, I think we've
Okay.
answered the question for July. It's
Mhm.
something that should be revisited maybe in September,
Okay.
and then, again in January or something like that. I mean, one of the questions I have is if they fly lower in January, do they also fly much less frequently? I mean, the traffic out to the islands, I would think, would drop off dramatically by the time we get to midwinter, unless they're commuters.
Well, I think they do a lot of commuter and business transportation.
Okay, but we're not
Oh.
but the tourists, which I think there's a lot of tourist traffic now. I'm guessing.
I'm guessing there's some, yeah, but most of the traffic that I've seen on an ongoing basis with both of those airlines is
Yeah.
during the week.
Yeah.
Like starting at, 6:30, 7.
I would agree.
Yeah.
Although 4th of July weekend, it was crazy.
Yeah.
But the subsequent weekends, it's definitely quieter, particularly on Sundays. But it just seems, I don't know. It'll be interesting. I mean, that's the one thing that my approach doesn't capture is the number of flights per day, because like I said, it's just random. I hear a plane, or I have the app open and I see a plane and I log it. I have made no attempt to count flights, and so
that would be you, Kathy.
Well,
Keep
I
track
did
of
that a
numbers.
couple times last year, just kind of unofficially. I tried to keep track. I kept a little piece of paper with me and tallied all the planes.
I'm talking use ADSB and take a look at a history over the day. And you should be able to generate
Oh,
that traffic over the whole day, because it does log a history in their system, but it doesn't store that long, so we got to find out how much data
Well,
is there.
they store it for 5 years, but we can't access it without the subscription.
Right, correct.
You can get current day stuff. But and then that we can probably resolve around the 9th.
Okay, somebody, I'll have to
board- ninth
figure, I
board
mean,
meeting.
I don't know how to do that, but I might need some
Um,
help with that. I'll take a look at it.
We know people that can help you.
Okay.
We know a few.
Okay, well, it's getting close to 8:30. I think we should let Dave go and have his dinner.
Dave
And
Dewey,
I feel like
thank you.
we have a
Thank
couple
you.
of, yes, thank you for joining. And I think we have a couple of action items for this next month at least. And I know this is a busy month I know it is for me. So I think it is for most everyone. Maybe somebody can I'll take a look at ADS and figure out how you can capture some of that information, but I'm gonna need some direction on that too. So,
Well, I'll see what I can find out about helicopters and the helicopter rules and traffic and all that.
okay,
We'll, and each time I find out something, I'll probably have another set of questions based on that.
perfect.
ADS does have a filter strictly for helicopters, so you can go strictly to helicopter traffic.
Yep, yeah. Okay,
All
All
right,
right,
I'm gonna go eat. Thanks, folks.
Okay,
right,
thanks,
thank you.
Dave. Thank you so much.
I'll send the spreadsheet around with a few comments by email.
Great.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
all right.
Good Saturday.
All
Saturday.
right. And so we'll see everybody else on Saturday. And I think, some of I appreciate all this conversation and yes.
I don't have the agenda in front of me, I'm sorry. We need to talk about materials from Aviation for the booth on Saturday. That's an absolute necessary.
Okay. What kind of thing would you,
What it is, what it's about, what we're trying to accomplish, the types of research we're looking for. Definitely at the top, more members. Looking for more members for it.
are you looking for like a little pamphlet handout kind of thing?
Handout, just a 8.5 by 11. You produce it and send it to me and we'll get it copied.
Well, I think what you've already put together having to do with the committee on the website would be a super start.
Okay,
I
Well,
agree.
a shortened maybe version of that,
sure.
more bullet pointy than reading. Because
Okay,
people don't stand and read stuff.
No, I understand. Okay, so if I can get it to you tomorrow sometime, it'll be before 2 o'clock or so.
Yeah,
You'll print it? You'll print it?
yep, we'll take care of that.
Okay,
So that's
Okay.
as long as it's 8.5 by 11.
all righty. I think that's enough for tonight. If we meet, we had talked about meeting it's that third Tuesday of the month. Does that still work for everybody?
Yep.
Yeah, other than this month.
All right, and next time, if there's a conflict, I'm gonna hear about it
Yeah,
early.
well, we're gonna put the committee, we're starting to looking at loading the committees and stuff into the calendar, which will help.
Yeah,
Um,
no worries. This worked out fine. I really appreciate, especially Lee and Dave being available to move till today. So that worked out fine. Okay, was there anything else that we should talk about tonight? No?
mm,
Okay. All right, well, I guess we'll see you on Saturday.
Yeah.
stop the recording.
Oh, thank you. Stop recording.